Okay, hi everybody, and welcome back to the Game Breakdown podcast, where we break down all the different kinds of games. So today is a really exciting one because Carrie has finally finished the first game.
Finally. Yeah.
Finally, the first game in my favorite franchise on the entire planet. So you have finally finished the first Resident Evil game, the remake,
I have.
and today we're going to talk all about it. I can't wait.
Yes. Because I've come to realise now that there is a lot of dedicated Resident Evil fans.
Yeah.
And I understand why. I
You
get it.
finally understand.
I get
You
it.
get the hype.
I get the hype. I understand completely. And I've just really enjoyed playing the first game. And I'm glad that I've still got another, well, we'll say another 6 to go.
Yeah. Well, if you're not including spin-offs, yep, definitely.
Yeah, I mean like main ones, but everyone wants me to play the spin-off, so I will get round to them as well, for sure.
So you have been playing the first one on Twitch and you've been streaming it live for people to watch. Do you think, that's an honest question, do you think you would have been able to complete it without support from the Twitch community?
I honestly can say there is not a chance I would have been able to complete that by myself, not looking in any sort of walkthroughs or anything like that. It was just so complex.
Yeah.
And I really wasn't expecting it to be more of a puzzle game. I always, from the outside looking in, thought, Resis they're just like zombie shooters, right? Like they're just a bit scary. Like there's not going to be any puzzles in it that would just, but no, it was the complete opposite. For anyone that watched it, if you're listening to this, or anyone that plans on watching it, I mostly just walk around saying, where am I going?
Yeah,
What was I doing?
that sounds about right. Yep.
Why have I got this? But I loved it. Like I liked the challenge, even though I couldn't have done it without support.
No,
But there were,
I agree.
yeah,
I think you did a really good job. I mean, I watched you for most, if not all of it, and it's interesting seeing someone who's never actually picked up a Resident Evil game, because we were having a similar discussion before. You are probably one of the only people I know who's into gaming who hasn't touched a Resi game. Like, I feel like you're quite a dying breed. I don't know a lot of people who enjoy survival horror but have never touched a Resident Evil game. So to see you play completely blind, having no idea really, because you've not even played the original games, have you?
no,
No. So seeing you have like a completely blind like look at the game was really interesting. There was a lot of puzzles that, because you're not like a seasoned Resident Evil player, you approach them in different ways, which is quite interesting, which we'll get to a bit later on, like some later on puzzles. But yeah,
yeah,
I thought it was really interesting to watch you. I think you did a good job.
yeah. And just on a quick side note, before we go properly into depth about Resi 1, obviously I've started Resi 2, the remake, and I've already began thinking a little bit more about how I do things from
Yep.
Resi 1. Like, the games have a way of kind of training your brain into how to handle certain situations and to think, no, they've done this because I shouldn't be doing what I'm about to do.
Yeah.
So like I shouldn't just shoot them. Like, I don't need to do this at this point. So yeah, it has a really clever way of making you play differently as
Yeah.
well.
It gives you a lot of red herrings, Resident Evil. It like makes you think, like you can see a lot of new players like watching you would walk into thinking of like, press this switch, and without looking around the room you'd be like, yeah, press it, and then like the room would fill with gas or something. Like there was a lot of times when you were like, why is that happening? But now watching you play through the second one, I can see that you're pausing, because like my one thing I thought when you were very first playing, I was like, she's not investigating the rooms enough. You were like walking in, clicking a few things, but like, oh, I can't do it, and then you were walking out and finding a new room. I was like, no, go back and investigate. Like, look around.
I know. I said I did a tweet about it, and I said, I'm always happily triggering people's OCD with my inventory space and the rooms, because I finished with a lot of red rooms, which got a lot of people stressed out. But in the moment, it's like, I just want to progress. Like, I just want to know why I've got this item, and I didn't think to go back because I knew it was just extras. But even though the extras would have been useful probably, but I was playing it on easy, so it was a little bit easier for me. Because hard was just, it was too difficult. But everyone said, like, you know, as a first time player, you're best off going on easy, so I didn't feel too bad.
Yeah, no, I think you did well. I think like I could see your thinking change partway through playing the first one, because there was a part where, I mean, obviously before we go any further, we are going to spoil the entire Resident Evil game, the
Yes, we are.
first one and the original as well. Maybe some others, but probably, but at least Resident Evil 1. When you got to the bit where you went underground with Lisa and you had to crush that box, it was really funny because you picked up the broken flamethrower, then you went, oh, okay, and then you went up and then you were like, I'm going to put this away, and I was like, you just got it out, why are you going to put it away? And then like you took 2 steps, and I was going to write in the chat, pick it back up, and you went, maybe I shouldn't put something away that I just picked up, maybe that's going to be useful. And then you went back and got it and then got to the next door. I was like, oh, she's starting to think. It's cool.
It's just, honestly, the game has a really clever way of making you feel really fucking stupid.
Hmm.
Like you just, and I've noticed this. It's a common theme where you'll pick something up and you'll be made to use it straight away, um, for your sub weapons, so your
Yeah.
defensive weapons. As soon as you pick it up, there'll be an instance where you'll end up using it straight away. So it's really clever that it just, basically makes you use stuff, and you're just like, I didn't want to use it, but you couldn't help but use it.
Yeah,
Um,
and it does that quite well, because there's also a few things that you won't necessarily need just yet, and because you use a lot of things quite quickly, you start thinking, oh, maybe I won't need that. But then, like in the same way, it makes you think the other way, because when you very first start the game, you start picking up the masks and the crests and stuff. You can't use them; that they don't do anything of any importance by themselves in that minute. So like you start trying to put them in everything. Like in the original, one of the very first items you can pick up is like the emblem which you put in the statue, and I remember you pick that up and you can't get into that door for a little bit. And I was like, just trying to slot it into every hole that I walk past. Like, can I fit it in here? Can I fit it in here? And you start
yeah.
thinking, oh, I'm not going to need it for hours. It's fine.
Well, that's literally what I did, because you can collect these the medals in the remake,
Yeah.
and when you go down through the gate, and I was trying to use a medal on a coffin, like I don't know why, but I just thought, come on, like something's got to work, And then it ends up being really obvious what it was needed for. But you do find yourself trying to just combine things and use everything. But it's like all part of the experience.
Hmm.
And I like the way that you can pick things up, and you don't. It's not even like you have to use them as well. Like there's obviously
Yeah.
like some items that you do need to use, but like for the most part, you can pick things up and yeah, just never touch them again. And
Like
obviously,
the
it
broken
was
shotgun.
the broken shotgun, exactly,
Hmm.
prime example. And I tried to use the broken shotgun further down the line with something, but obviously there was no point to it because I'd already got past the bit that it needed.
Yeah.
But it still made me think, like, should have I used this? You know what I mean? Like, is there still a place for it? It just gets
That
you
was
thinking.
actually like when you tried to open the door with the broken shotgun, you went, I've got the broken shotgun, maybe it goes there. And then that's when I was typing in the thing for you. I was like, no, 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 that's where the flamethrower goes. Like, but you like stopped it around before I got to you, so you realized it. But it makes you think, like there's so many items also that are there's not loads, but there are quite a few that are necessary. But it's quite a literal game. And I think I saw, like you even said yourself during one of your streams, you were like, how do I open this box? And literally examine it and press open. Like there's so many things you wouldn't even
Yeah.
think of, and you were like, God, this game's so literal.
It just goes to show how kind of maybe spoon fed we are as players now, that
Hmm.
we always associate things like, for example, when I went into my crate to drop stuff off when I was saving, it doesn't automatically arrange it. So I had
Yeah,
gaps everywhere, and you're just so used to like the game looking after you. Whereas
yeah,
like Resi 1 will not look after you.
no,
Like there is no there's you just go in there blind and you can either do it or you can't do it. Like that's pretty much how it works, which I like. I liked that. I don't, but I know that if I was to play it without having the support and people watching me, it would have took me a lot longer. I finished in 16 hours, and yeah, you laugh because you're like a veteran. But I was also
no. But
talking
that's
to people.
good for someone's first playthrough. That's really good because it is so confusing. I thought it'd be longer, to be honest.
Yeah, they said, well, there was actually a graph, and it said something like, obviously you can beat it in 3 hours because there's like a trophy for it.
Hmm.
Most people tend to beat it around I think it's like 15 to 18 hour mark, and then obviously you've got your 20 plus hours, which is like they graded it as like the worst grade because obviously it's like a long amount of time.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, like I did think it was longer. That I did think it took me longer than it actually did. So I was quite chuffed. And now I've done it, I know I can probably go back and do it in a bit less time. And then you slowly, I guess, know it so well that you will be able to bash it out in 3 hours because you know
yeah.
where you need to go, what you don't need. So yeah, they've got a lot of replayability, these games, which is really
It
nice.
it really does. But I think you're being a bit harsh on yourself as well. I think if you were to replay it, you would in a fraction of the time that you did it in, because a lot of the time a lot of wasted time that you have was you investigating and looking around and going from room to room because you weren't sure. Once you know roughly what order things need to be in or where they need to go, you could do it in. You could shave off hours of what you actually achieved.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, like it comes with like practice. A lot of people might go, "Oh, that's not really like a good time." But the original one, I can bang that out in like 2 to 3 hours. But I've played that game in excess of 10 times, and I know where everything goes. And the only reason I did the remake quicker than you is because certain items I picked up, and I'm like, "Oh, I know where that's got to go." And even if they changed it ever so slightly, I was still in the right area, so
Yeah.
it's easier. Whereas for you, it's like completely blind. I
Yeah.
mean, so you played as Jill, right?
I did.
So you
Yes.
played your very first playthrough as Jill, which in the original was considered the easier option because there wasn't a difficulty setting. It was either you play as Chris and Jill had like a few perks, like she had more inventory space and she had a lockpick, and everyone was like, "Oh, she's the easier one." But Chris had his things as well. Like he had less inventory space and he had to use small keys to like, open things rather than lockpick. But he had like more health, for example, and could take more bites. So like it was a bit of a trade off. But you played as Jill and you played through on easy. How did the first like 10 minutes go for you? Like,
Right. If we're right, okay. My first 10 minutes on easy was a massive relief because I'd started the game originally on hard
mhm.
because it doesn't give you the easy option first, it gives you the hard option first.
Yeah.
So I naturally just clicked the first one thinking, I'm sure this is easy, it's fine. And I didn't read the description,
Well,
which is
actually, let's just talk
also,
about that for a second. It's not like a proper. It
it's
doesn't say
not.
like easy, normal,
It's
hard.
something like, it's something like, do you want to
I
attempt
enjoy
to climb a
challenge.
mountain
Yeah, yeah.
with loads of things falling down at you or something? And then the other one's like, do you want to just have a casual climb or something?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I didn't, my fault, didn't read through it. Just says how the game was going to go. I didn't
Yeah.
read things. But yeah, so I did that, and then I thought this ain't too bad because I ended up killing the first zombie that you meet with Barry,
Hmm. Good old Barry.
which I didn't have to do, but I did it
Hmm.
because I was none the wiser. And then I went out into the graveyard, and there were two zombies, I think, and no, it
Hmm.
might be three or two zombies, and I couldn't dodge them in that small space because I was
Yeah.
still trying to figure out the controls slightly, and I died twice, and I thought, yeah, this is not going to happen on that difficulty.
No.
And upon finishing the game, now I realize how important it was to do an easy run through. So if like you've never played a Resi game before, do not feel ashamed. Definitely do it on easy, especially if you want to get good at the games, and because there is a lot to sort of catch up with them,
Yeah.
which is what I'm finding. So yeah, it's a task in itself, isn't it? It's not just a horror game, the Resi games. It's strategy, it's management. It's like, yeah, it's a bit
It's
more
quite
complicated.
realistic in that sense because if you were in that situation, it's real. Like item management, I don't have space that I can't carry that. I don't know where I've got to go. Like looking at the map every 5 seconds, enemies around. And the thing is, even with you going on easy or very easy or whatever, it doesn't really make too much of it. I mean, it does because the enemies are easier, but only the enemies are easier. The puzzles aren't any easier, and there's a fuck ton of puzzles. Like it doesn't make them any easier or spoon feed them for you. So you're still getting the same amount of challenge from the game that a lot of people would, even playing on hard, would get for the first time. It's just that you've got the kind of the luxury, if you like, of less aggressive enemies.
Yeah, but it's also a situation like I found myself in a few spots, even on very easy, where I'd misjudged a
Hmm.
dodge or like I got myself cornered quite quickly. And
Yeah,
the only thing easy or very easy kind of does, I guess, is allow you to be hit maybe once or twice more. But realistically, like, and obviously there's less enemies, but you do get into like these situations where you've got four zombies in a very confined space with a fixed camera angle, and you will get attacked, and then you'll just die like you would on hard. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you can it can go from easy to like quite difficult quite quickly,
I
which
think so.
which is yeah, which is still good. It's still challenging. It doesn't feel like, oh, I wish I hadn't put this on easy because it's too easy. Like
Hmm.
I didn't play that game and think it was too easy. Apart from the beginning when I realized like I wasn't going to get downed in 2 hits. I was going to last for maybe like 4 hits. So to me that was like, okay, like it's not as bad. But then you meet new versions of the enemies and they can hit you quicker. And oh my god, there was one point where I'd done quite a few things. I'd opened a jewelry box. I'd um I'd ran to the completely other side. I had to run back again to get a lighter that I didn't even need. Like I did all this stupid stuff and I got downed in one hit by one of the hunters,
Yep.
which apparently used a special move, which like
One hit kill.
yeah, one hit killed me even on very easy. Maybe I was slightly on caution without realizing it, but either way, I had to go back and do it again, and I just felt like such an idiot. I thought, why didn't you save? You know, but like obviously it's beginners situation in it. Like now I'd know, you know,
That's part of it though. It's like the
yeah,
saving strategies, knowing when and also like if you played it more, you would know when there's going to be less enemies and you know, right, I haven't got saved for an hour. But then like for example, when in the original, once you've like done most of the first parts of the mansion, you go into the courtyard, you can do kind of all that without saving because it's just basic zombies. But then when you are about to come back, that's when you should save because the hunters then join and they're a lot harder. Because a hunter, if I remember right, they can't kill you on fine, but if you're on caution, they can take you out in one hit. And like, whereas you wouldn't know that. And that's why actually in the chat, when you were doing this bit and you were leaving the mansion, I said, definitely save before you leave. And there was the bit when you first went out, you know, where the hunter then runs through and opens the door in that cutscene.
yeah.
And you were like, what the fuck is that? Like, I was like, she better save because this is going to really hit her hard.
That's literally the story of my life playing this game.
Mm.
And any Resi game, it's there's something new waiting around every corner, and you're just like, what the hell was that? You know,
Yeah.
like, and they're all very different characters. Like they don't do the same things, and they're just dressed differently. Like they look different, they act different, and they cause different issues.
Yeah.
So it's like it's always very different, and that game's so replayable even if you play one half. Now I
Mm-hmm.
haven't played obviously Chris's half. I'm going to get back to that once I've sort of gone through a few more, because I know it's going to be just as challenging as Jill's was, because
Yeah.
it's even though I know the mansion, like I'm going to probably be seeing different parts. I'm not going to have like, you know, what do you call it, a lockpick. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's going to be a whole new challenge, and it'll probably take me another 16 hours, you know, until I figure it out. So yeah,
It is different in that
interesting.
sense. There's different challenges because his scenario doesn't necessarily, in the first game anyway, doesn't really navigate that much more from Jill's. Like it's kind of the same thing, but you obviously he's a different person. So he has different reactions, different characters. There's certain characters don't interact with like, but Barry, for example, isn't part of your scenario, whereas he's part of Jill's. Like it's more you meet somebody different, and there's like different characters and stuff. But your main story is quite similar. But like you said, you're not going to have a lockpick. So all the doors that Jill just free and easy walk through with a lockpick, he needs a small key. So then you need to go hunting and find a small key. And then it's like, do I use it in this drawer to give me some more ammo, or do I use it to open this door that might lead me somewhere important? Like it's like weighing up the pros and cons of when to do certain things. So
Yeah,
I think you'll really enjoy playing Chris's playthrough. Also, he has less inventory space, but he's also got a bit more health. So you
yeah,
have to learn a bit more about item management.
which I'm clearly not good at, but I'm getting there slowly. I'm slowly improving with that one. I'm just so used to a never ending inventory in games. And
Mm-hmm.
Resi really kind of puts that to shame and says, no, this isn't real life. This is, you know, you need to figure out, are you going to need that one item that seemed kind of useful but not that useful?
Yeah,
You know, are you really going to need all that ammo, or can you just get by on your 6 bullets? Like,
yeah,
it's yeah, it's really interesting. But the story as well, I think the overall story of it, this is where we'll probably get into like some serious spoilers.
yeah,
It was very slow in the beginning because obviously you're kind of finding things and no story's really clear, but then it quickly kind of makes a turn, doesn't it? And you start to
mm-hmm.
realize people aren't your friends, and then you feel lost and confused and you don't trust
Yep,
anyone, and you get given decisions. Like you get given a decision with Barry. So if anyone's not played this, yeah, you can either give him a gun back or not. No, I've not seen the repercussions of not giving him his gun back because I gave it back to him, which I didn't want to do, but I did it anyways because I was told
yeah.
um,
To trust Barry.
to trust Barry. Yeah. So
I mean, what do you think happens if you don't give it back to Barry? What's your
I'm gonna assume that Barry dies, or everyone dies. I don't know. It's going to be a bad ending, isn't it? Either way, because but he's not very useful anyways. Baza was not that useful in the fights.
see? It depends. It depends how useful he is because if you play it, the thing is about Resident Evil in all of them, you can always encounter things usually in a different order each way. So like where you encountered Barry for the first time properly, like when you encountered him in your first meeting with him that's not part of the intro sequence, can be in like two different rooms. And when you go to get the grenade launcher off of your dead comrade Forrest, who's like in at the balcony, you can encounter Barry there instead. And if you meet him there instead, he turns up at different points of the game. So in the original, for example, you could meet him at different sections, and depending on when you meet him, or depending how much you do yourself, he will help or won't help. So, like for example, when you were fighting the plant, and I said to you, if you're unsure about the fight, the actual fight, make the V gel, which is when you mix the UMBs to make the V gel chemical to pour on the roots. If you do that, when you go for the fight, the plant gets you, and Barry comes and saves you. It's like he comes and saves the day. But because you didn't do that, you literally killed the plant outright. It's like it depends on how you play it, in that changes how Barry reacts to you and how Barry helps you. And it changed your relationship with him, because if he hasn't saved you 3 times, you're like, well, you've done nothing for me. I don't even really know you. Whereas if he saved you a bunch of times, you're like, well, why would he save me if he wants me dead? Like there must be something that he wants here.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. But it definitely makes you like not trust him for the most part, or anyone for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of just, I mean, the only person that I trust was Chris, and yeah, it can be very sad if you don't figure out what you've got to do, which is quite tricky in itself because
Mm-hmm.
there was most times that I'd done everything that I needed to, and it was one simple mistake that would have fucked that all up,
Yeah.
not pressing a button, and I'd have just completely lost that ending. So it's like, but yeah, it is good. The story's good. The puzzles are very, I wouldn't even say like the initial puzzles, it's always the lead up to the puzzles. Like they're
Yeah.
kind of like dealable, but it's like you get given a lot of new stuff. I think the characters are really interesting. I I felt like I saw like growth with Jill. So she started pretty kind of lost, and like Barry gives her a lockpick and she's very confused and everything, but then she sort of gets a bit of a backbone because obviously Barry fucked her over at one
Mm-hmm.
point, and she kicks the gun out of his hand, and then obviously you can give it back or not. And I was like, yes, Jill, like show some backbone. And you
Yeah.
gradually see her get stronger. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited to play number 3 and see like where she's at now. Like does she have the same kind of personality as she did in number 1? Like how has she grown over the games?
Yeah.
Um, which I quite like. So I do like the fact that she's not as stupid as she's made out. I thought that was really cool.
You do really see a lot of growth in Jill. I think because obviously I think because it's quite shocking because they start off, it's quite a normal universe. So when they go into their house and it's full of zombies and monsters, it's a bit like it shows how it would be for anybody, like quite confusing and like what's happening here. But the way they just like, it seems a bit silly at first where they just progress. Well, let's just investigate. Like it's like running alive with the Walking Dead and something that should not have existed. And they're like, well, let's just carry on investigating and let's split up. Like it's all very cheesy at some points. And you think Jill is a little bit too naive. But then as you move on, like you said, she does like click a little bit more and she becomes a bit more aware of herself when Barry almost tries to put a gun to her head and she like literally whips it out of his hand and pulls the biggest Uno reverse card that she could and like gets to
Yeah.
him.
Speaking of cheesiness, I love it. I mean, obviously, I played the remake of number 1, so I've not had the blessing of the pure cheesiness from the original game, but it's
Yeah,
still pretty cheesy,
it's
and
still
I love
cheesy.
it. And I wish they just kept it super cheesy for like the later games. I just love it.
Hmm.
I love that side of it. It makes it what it is, doesn't it?
It does, and like I did enjoy the remake's cheesiness, but I like nothing will compare to the original. Like the original's not really necessarily cheesy. The original's just like not very well translated. Like it doesn't, a lot of it
Yeah,
doesn't quite make sense.
that's just the problem.
There's a lot
Um,
of kind of like bits where the conversation just makes absolutely no sense, and like there's the whole, and it was the birth of like the iconic lines, like the Jill sandwich line, like you were almost a Jill sandwich, and she goes, I know, like it's just really silly, like. And then when they're like the bit that I was telling you about before, so when Barry puts the gun to your head and you're with Wesker at the end of the game, pretty much, that's when after Barry saves you and like knocks the gun out of Wesker's hand and shoots him, that's when Barry in the original will turn and go, do you think like we can see Tyrant now? And Jill goes, Barry, you're so optimistic. And it makes like what? Like it makes zero sense to what's happening to the game. You're like, okay, let's go in there. Like, why is he optimistic? Why have he used that word? It doesn't make sense. Whereas in this one, in the remake, obviously it's better and probably written by English people, English speaking people, but it still is a bit stupid.
yeah, it's still got
It's
that kind of, yeah. cheesy, sort of confused tone that makes no
It's like a
sense. But
90s action American movie. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, it is. It is.
Hmm.
Um, I think
What did you
another
think?
thing
Oh, go on.
I was going to go on about controls.
That's exactly what I was going to go on to.
Yeah,
See,
so
two peas in a
we're
pod.
syncing up. Yeah, controls. So yeah, when I first started it, I was like, okay, yeah, it's the fixed camera angles and
Hmm. Yeah.
that dodginess, but yeah, it didn't take anything away from it for me. It felt like it worked really well. And I got used to it after a while. I definitely got used to it, but there were moments where I was like about to die, but I couldn't run because I just run back as soon as the
Hmm.
camera changed. But yeah, I liked it. I liked the controls. Um, I can't really imagine it being over the shoulder, but then again, I reckon you'd feel a lot more closed in if it was, because you still feel closed in actually, anyways, even though they're fixed camera angles. But like,
See, here's my thing. Like, I enjoy the fixed camera angles because it's what the original had. But at the same time, with a remake like that, I don't think it necessarily works the best because they if you play the remake with the original tank controls, which is what I ended up doing, I ended up changing the settings completely to not allow me to move with my analog stick. It works better because you're used to playing it that way, or someone who's played the Resi games before knows how to play that way. When you involve the analog stick and start allowing your character to be like like free roaming motion, for me it becomes a problem because what I found whenever I changed camera angle, if there was an enemy there or something happened and I just for a split second let go of the analog stick or move in the opposite direction, Jill would flip or Chris would flip and the camera would change and then it'd become a bit confusing. And there was a few times where I got bitten purely because of the way that my camera or controls freaked out. And it was
yeah,
like spoiling the game for me a bit. I was like, I need to change this. I need to go back to tank because this isn't working. But
yeah.
as someone who's never played the original, did you prefer moving like a tank or did you prefer with the free control?
I mean, obviously, I've never played the original, so I think if you're new to it, it almost feels more natural now with modern gaming to have a bit more flexibility in the analog stick.
Yeah.
However, it's almost fighting against the cameras. So
Yeah.
it's like for most rooms you could walk fine, but then if you're in a bit of a sticky situation, like you got you're like, oh my, I cannot let go of this joint, whatever it is, fun stick, because if
It's
I
analog
do, I'm
stick.
going to go straight back, and
Hmm.
it's like, and then you find yourself going back and forward between two angles. Sometimes you're just going back and forward and you're like, oh my god. But again, like, it didn't take too much away from the game, but obviously it's crazy how the controls of that game are so important to it.
Hmm.
Like, it's something that everyone kind of thinks of. Like, we normally pick up games and we just play them and we don't think about the controls, whereas with
Yeah.
that, it's like there's a lot of like debate over it, whether it works, whether it doesn't work, whether they should have kept it. And obviously you played on the with the original controls, and I've started obviously the second remake right now, and a lot of people say they would have liked it if it had tank controls. And someone else said, yes, that would be amazing. And I just thought, do you really think that was the game for it? Like, what was it about that? Like, why would you
Hmm.
think that? Because obviously you're shaking your head and you're thinking, no,
No.
it's done with. Like, the over the shoulder sort of angle is what works best now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the over the shoulder angle works best. I mean, there's a lot more to it because I guess that if you're having fixed camera angles and you're moving, like I think tank works best for that because it adds especially if you think back when the game was first made, it added it was pretty graphically it was probably achievable rather than having a free roaming character, but also it like adds a different level of scare. So you have to think about your motion as well as everything else, your item management, your bullets, whatever, because if a zombie comes at you, I mean, in the RE1, in the original one, there's no quick turn. In RE3, I don't know if RE2, I think it was RE3, they implemented a quick turn where you could press back and square and your character would like do like a 180 flip and you could run in the opposite direction, but for the first one you couldn't. So if an enemy did come towards you or jump out of nowhere, you had to like think quick and think, right, do I turn left and run, or do I back away and then do something, or do I shoot and then turn and run? Like, you have to think about the way your character moves, which I think is quite clever. However, I now think it's things have moved on, and the over the shoulder camera I think works really well. I see why they didn't do it in Resi 1, But in Resi 2, no, I think the way they wanted to make the game, because the Resi 1 remake is all like pre-rendered, like the original game. They apparently tried to make it all a 3D world, but ran into issues with the GameCube's power, so they had to then just make everything pre-rendered, which obviously photographic tech has come so far that it doesn't matter because the pictures can be super high quality and it all looks great still, and you can do a lot more with the animation of the characters and stuff because there's less memory loading a room. I can see again they were held back graphically, but I know I think moving forward it should be over the shoulder. Like I would even say that I would really want a remake of Resident Evil 1 over the shoulder. I think that would be brilliant.
Yeah, I get quite excited about that thought now because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it stands the test of time. Like, don't get me wrong, but the RE engine now, like the first thing I said as soon as I started number two, I don't know whether it was because I've been obviously playing remake, the first remake, which I still think was absolutely gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as soon as I started playing that game, I was just like, oh my god, this looks amazing. And I can imagine when uh originally when number seven came out, I think was that the first. I don't know this, but
Mm-hmm.
obviously, but I'm assuming that was the first time they used the RE engine for their game. I could be totally wrong. I'm not
I
sure
think so. No, I think that was the first time.
because
No, they might have used it for. Oh god, they might have used it for Revelations 2, but I could be wrong there. I think it was 7. Oh my god,
my cat just
for
jumped on
people
the
listening, a
microphone. I'm
cat
very
just
sorry.
joined the podcast.
But yeah, I
Yeah, I
just
think it was
thought,
7.
yeah, I just thought this game is beautiful. Like it's got this little glossiness to it, and it just looks amazing. And the lighting is incredible on that on RE2.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm just loving it, and I can't wait to like dive into it more. But
Yeah.
yeah, my first experience of like Resi One is I don't know why I never played the game sooner. The story is actually really quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
kind of wish there was more to it, but obviously it's not a narrative game. It's a puzzle game with a bit of horror, not horror, but like a bit of jumpiness and you know tactile gameplay. But
I would
in my
agree.
opinion,
Yeah, no, I
yeah,
think you're right. I think especially when it was originally made, basically it's from what I've seen on the internet and stuff, it was a remake of an old Japanese game that was based on a TV series or a film called Sweet Home, which is like full of like monsters and magic and stuff. So they wanted to remake this game, and then eventually it became too far away from the original game, and they said let's make it an independent IP, and they called it Resident Evil, or they had called it Biohazard, and then whatever. So I I think that yeah.
there's I guess like the story is always not the main point of it, but you get
Yeah,
fed
like I
bits
don't
of
think it was
story.
made to be a
Uh,
story game, if you know what I mean.
yeah, like, but it's almost kind of sad to me that the story isn't pushed on more because,
Hmm.
I
It's
mean,
good.
yeah, the whole idea of like Umbrella and like this absolute shit show that they've caused, and all these different versions of like whatever this virus has done to people and everything. I just think like and Wesker as well being the dark horse that he is, and you just think
Hmm.
like that would have been so good, but obviously back then I guess it wasn't exactly like the idea. It was like we want you to be as confused as we are, I guess, like because you only figure things out like as you go along. So I guess that makes sense, but I think coming from like more of a narrative type of player, I do wish there was more to it because I love like how dark it is, and
Yeah,
I love the different designs. Like I said before, like no enemy is the same. Like they all act differently. They've all got different traits, and I just wish it could have played on it more. And that didn't really come through until you get to the bottom of the game where you're like in the lab.
yeah.
To me, that's when it finally came out, and you start to see things. You know, um, so yeah,
I would say
that's
that's the same in the original though, that the way the story develops, because
mm,
I would even say at one point the original does a little bit of a better job in convincing you of certain things because it like the speech is so bad and like whatever. Your interactions with other characters are kind of limited. So I mean, you know, when you bump into Wesker in the hall where he's shooting the bees in the second part of the mansion, and he goes, "Have you noticed that Barry's been acting a little bit strange recently?" And like puts and kind of plants a seed. I mean, to me, it's obvious what he's doing, but when you play the original, it's not as clear cut because all you know is that Wesker's gone missing and that Chris has gone missing. And then when you eventually meet Wesker at that point, it's not the same kind of thing doesn't play out. Like you see him and he's like, "Oh, Jill, you're safe." And she goes, "I'm glad you are too." And you have a slight conversation. And then he does hint to you in a different way. He goes, he says something along the lines of like, and keep an eye on Barry, and then doesn't really fully explain it, but you think he's my boss, he's like the guy in charge of my squad, he's not going to betray me. Like, it does a better job of you having to think of like, is Barry trustworthy? And then there comes, like, you know, where you have the option to give the gun back to Barry. Obviously that whole Lisa Trevor segment isn't in the original game, but there are similar situations where it's like, go with Barry, have Barry go first, have you go first. Like, it does a better job of you of playing off of your feelings towards Barry, because there's like three separate times almost where you have to choose whether you do something or Barry does something, and you think like, oh well, I don't trust him, so he can go first and he can get killed, or no, I can go first and I'll take the brunt of it. Like, it's kind of, I think it does
Yeah,
almost a better job in that way.
I think saying that actually, now you've mentioned Lisa, she was probably the main highlight of the game in the fact that she comes
Yeah.
into it relatively late, at least in my
Hmm.
playthrough,
Yeah.
and I felt like her story was so emotional and like so sad that, but it was played really well because you get little kind of snippets from her right up until her, like, I guess final moment, maybe. I don't know whether it is or not, but because obviously
Hmm.
she can't actually be killed, which took me a few times to understand that. But but yeah, like, and oh yeah, she was probably, yeah, her narrative, like the narrative for her and the story for her, I thought was really interesting, and I'm glad they involved that because even though you only meet her on a few occasions, she just adds so much to it because she's just this little lost soul that isn't
Yeah.
particularly mindless. Like, she's still got a bit of humanity in her, and she's just upset and hurt, and she wants her mum because she's been fucked up by what's happened to her. And
Yeah.
it's like she's the only humanity in that place. And funnily enough, like, she can't be destroyed
Yeah.
because she's just crying out for her mum. And it's like, and then you learn that she wears her mum's face, and it was like, oh,
Grim.
you wear it, hon. No, I
Yeah.
was like, you wear your mum's face. Like, I feel for you.
That's cute. Wear your mum's face. Love
Yeah,
it.
wear your mum's face. It's a bit like, yeah, it kind of reminds me of Ed Gein. He wore people's faces. He's a serial killer. Yeah, but
Lovely.
I know. And then, like, yeah, she has a very twisted ending that actually made me happy. When you think, why is this making me happy? Like, like,
The fact that she actually gets her mum's skull.
yeah, so once you figure out how to get the mum's skull, which took me a
Mhm.
while, I don't know why, because
You're
it was
welcome.
so obvious. Yeah, thank you. But once you figure out that, yeah, she gets a mum's skull and then she just like jumps into oblivion, and you're like, yes, like, at least you've kind of got what you wanted or what you could have of your mum,
Yeah.
and now you're ready to just go, you know. So yeah, that was probably the deepest part of that game.
See, my thing with that is I liked the inclusion of Lisa Trevor because, like I said, there's no mention of her in the original. She's a new thing for the remake. Is that there's never any conversation about her, and I think it's all has to be found out during files and like things you find around the mansion. And like there was a few that I saw you when you were like skipping through as well, because Resident Evil files are long, but like the story concerned, a lot of you will know that if you read through the other ones of like George Trevor, I mean that's obviously her dad, and you
Mm.
you find out what happened to her dad and how he almost left his wife and daughter behind and tried to escape, and he said he was going to come back, but then Umbrella tricked him, and the Spencer mansion took him away from everybody. Like, you learn that it's quite a dark story, and that when you find her little bed, and then when you click on it, basically it says it's still warm, it's still used, you know that she's tormented, but she's still a little girl. Like, she's still able to sort of go to sleep and live down there almost, and she's got little barrels of water that she drinks from. That she's actually fighting for her survival, and all we've tried to do all game is basically kill her and get her out of our way because she's a monster. And it's like, oh,
Yeah, but
oh dear,
she's only a monster because of how hurt she is, isn't she? Like,
all
if
the
she,
research and shit.
yeah,
Like,
and I feel like if her mum wasn't fucked up, then they'd probably be this really sweet little fucked up people in their
fam.
little cave, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm obviously I do want to go back and play the originals to compare them. I said I'd want to do it backwards because I
Mhm.
would like to see it without her because she was quite important to me in that game. Um, so yeah, it'll be really interesting to go back and play the originals and see what they did right, what they did wrong. Like, why didn't you include this in the remakes? You know, and like, oh, I'm glad they didn't include that or whatever. Like,
Well, that's literally what I was about to say. What I appreciate about this RE1 remake is they didn't cut anything out. And this is where they needed to learn their lesson for, no spoilers, but for Resident Evil 3. because when they remade that, they cut a lot of content out. Whereas like the Resident Evil 1 remake, I mean, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't really know of anything that was cut out. Everything that I saw that wasn't that was in the original was either used faithfully or was repurposed. So like for example, you know when you had to progress to the next part basically by collecting the 4 death masks, and then you got the crank and what have you, that's not a thing in the original, but the crests are. So you had to get the wind crest, and you then got 3 more crests, and that was part of a puzzle to get the magnum, right?
Right.
In the original, the crests are what's hidden around the mansion, and you find the crest and you put all the crests in to open the courtyard door. So like they progress you to the next part of the game where you go into the second mansion and find the bees and everything. So like they, even though they cut the use of the crest, they repurpose them and use
Yeah.
them for a different reason. So like I don't think that anything was actually cut. I mean, all of the enemies were there, the snake and Richard. Oh, I'll tell you what they did add, the things that they did add. So like when you encounter Richard for the first time, so Richard is the guy who has been bitten by the snake, and you meet him and he's like, Jill, I need the serum, blah 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 blah.
Mm.
So in the original you've got 2 options which are really silly. So you can go and get him the serum that he actually needs,
Right.
and I think it's done, I don't even know if it's done by time, I think it's done by the amount of doors you go through. But either way, you've got a certain amount of time, let's say, to get the serum for him, and if you don't get it for him, then he dies in front of you, and I think you get something like a bit of extra ammo, and you get to keep the serum for when you're bit by the snake, and you can use that to heal yourself. If you do bring him the serum, you give him the serum, you inject him, and then he gives you his radio, and then he dies anyway, like within seconds. He's like, this house is
Mm.
full of terrible demons, and then just like dies. So that's kind of it. And then when you if you get bit by the snake, who's going to save you? Have a guess.
Barry.
Yeah. So like it changes the way your playthrough works.
Yeah. See,
But
I
in
let
the
Richard die a bit. Well, yeah, I did. I let him die.
You did,
I
but
got
I think
lost.
you didn't know where you were going though, did you?
No, I was
No.
like, I know where the serum is, and then it showed me, and I was like, yeah, but I know where it is, and then I couldn't figure my way back to him, and I was like, well, never mind. It's
See,
been
but
fun. We tried.
exactly, and I think they did that better because when you do save him in the remake, I don't know, you didn't save him, did you? So when you do
No.
save him, he sits there like uncomfortably for like ages until you find the key. Then when you get in there, he jumps in and starts helping you fight the snake, and then he eventually dies anyway, like 5 seconds later. But you get to then pick up his assault shotgun, so you get like a little perk, which is quite nice.
Oh, see, that would have been nice to have. I think when I
Yeah,
play it again on a higher difficulty, then I'll definitely try and save Richard because I will need the assault rifle.
yeah, it's a good little tool.
Yeah, I loved it. That Magnum was crazy strong though. I was so
Yeah.
glad I got that because I missed it first time round, and it weren't until I did all that bit to allow me to basically kind of go back on myself so I could actually find it, which was
Hmm.
conveniently as soon as I started up my game from when I'd previously played it. I managed
Yeah.
to get the Magnum straight away ready for the end of the game. Otherwise, I probably would have been running around in circles trying to find out where this gravestone was.
Literally, because that's the last time you passed through there. Because and I literally had only played it recently before you played it, and that's why all I said was in the little chat, I was like, "Take the crest with you." I was like, "You'll need it," and stop in the graveyard, and that's what I'm saying.
That was the funny thing. Like everyone that's watched me play it, and I'm sure anyone that watches me play the future games or whatever,
Hmm.
they
Yeah,
everyone knows it so well. And when I do things, they know they've kind of figured me out, I guess, as a player. So it's like, I know you're not going to do that, so I'm going to tell you to do that.
yeah,
Or they won't tell me because they think it's funny that I'm going to fuck it up. So
yeah.
like I went into this room and I didn't need a lighter, but I went back for the lighter. I don't know if he was watching at that point. Then I
Hmm.
ran around the room for literally 10 minutes, like, do I light the books on fire? Do I light the phone on fire? Do I light this on fire? And eventually I found a switch and I was like, why did no one tell me that I didn't need the lighter?
Yeah.
But yeah, everyone's sort of like, yeah, a lot of people know it like the back of their hands. So it's quite funny, especially me now watching it back. I think, what the hell were you doing? And I watched my friend play it because he wanted to beat my time. And I found myself desperately trying not to tell him what to do. So I can
Yeah.
only imagine what people were doing with me when I was like, the answer was right in front of me. You know,
It's hard, isn't it? Because it's such a complex game. When you solve it, you feel like you've really achieved something.
it's like the
So you feel
X-ray
like,
puzzle. The X-ray puzzle is
oh,
so
okay.
night and day in
Yeah.
reality, but at the same time, I thought, is that too easy? But then again, it's like, well, no, like Oh, it's weird. It was a weird one, but I wasn't alone in that. Like someone else found it a bit of a weird puzzle.
See, there was people in your chat who were like, I think this puzzle's really hard and pointlessly hard, but I don't necessarily think it is, but again, it could be because I've played the original, because the puzzle isn't the same. Like in the original, it's basically there's a picture on the wall of I think it's Adam and Eve, and you look at the picture and it looks fine, but then you go to the desk and there's a note left by John, the guy who has his password as Ada. There's a note left by
Mm.
him, and he's writing a note to Ada telling her what to do, and he leaves a like a cipher for her of code, so like certain shapes equal certain letters. Then when you go back and look at the picture, you can't see anything, and suddenly you find a blue light at the back of the room, and it goes UV, and then above each part of the picture. So there's Eve, there's the apple, there's Adam, there's a snake, there's a tree. They all have different letters. And then you have to figure out his code and match it to the picture. And then you find out the
Right.
password is Eden or something, I think it is. Like, and it's a little bit more, not necessarily easier, but it's more obvious on what you have to actually do. I
Yeah.
say the kind of the X-ray one was a little bit, I had to think a little bit, but I had a rough idea of what it was going to be because of the original. I think if
Yeah.
I just walked into that room, I'd be a bit like, because you kept exchanging them, and you were going, "What does it do when I exchange them?" And you hadn't realised, because it's not obvious, that it's just swapping the two posters around, because you can click on each individual poster. I don't think you realised that at first.
No, yeah, because I'd done it and then I thought, right, I've put it in place. Why are you giving me the option
Hmm.
to move it? But then obviously it makes sense because originally there's only one poster, so
Yeah.
you could quite easily have put them in the wrong place. I just
Hmm.
happened to do them perfectly right.
Yeah.
And then it said obviously the names are in alphabetical order. So I looked at that and I thought, okay, well they are already in alphabetical order. And then I looked at the other one and I was like, right, so I'm assuming it's going to be from top to bottom. And that was my initial thought process, which was
Yeah.
correct. But I second guessed it and I started moving things around. And then I was just like, what am I doing? And then I put call in instead of sell. And I
Oh my
was
god,
like, how
that.
did I? And everyone, everyone was fuming. Even Shana was downstairs, like, what are you doing? And I was just like,
That was what I meant earlier when I said you didn't investigate things enough, because you literally typed it in
yeah.
wrong and went, "It doesn't work. I'll go back." And I was like, "No." I was like, "Try it
No.
again." I was like,
Everyone
"You
was
haven't."
like, read the text or read this or do that. And I was like, oh, it seems so easy, but why is it not?
But also, you have to remember, like, you're on Twitch, so like, one, you're being watched,
Mm.
and you have to be entertaining, and two, that you've got a lot of voices in your ear. Some of them are right, and some of them, because there was a guy who, I don't know if he said he played it a long time ago or whatever, but he kept saying to you, and he wasn't necessarily wrong, but he was going, "Oh, maybe try this. Maybe it means the initials of the organs. Maybe it means the initials of this." And you were like, "Yeah, maybe." And you were generally having a discussion with him, but because he didn't know, you were investigating his theories. But if you were by yourself, you probably would have
Yeah.
come to the conclusion a bit quicker. Do you know what I mean? It's not his fault, but what I'm saying is there's so many different cooks in the kitchen that
Yeah,
you're
no,
like, "Oh, what
definitely.
do I do?"
Definitely. I've loved it. I've loved streaming it for that. I think it's been a really fun game to stream. Which is quite strange because for the most part you do find yourself walking around a lot. There's not a lot of action to like talk about, because you're trying to
Yeah,
figure things out. Um but it has been fun because everyone's got involved with it, and there's a lot of, obviously, like I said before, like passionate people, so it's nice to have everyone involved in it and realize how important this series is. I mean, the amount of people that have said, oh my god, is this your first time? This is like
hmm,
this means so much to me, this series,
yeah,
and I'm like, oh my god, like I can't believe I've only just started it. But I can see why, and like especially now going on to like the later games and seeing how it's grown and it's still got the kind of, I mean, obviously, I've only just started the second remake, but
yeah,
I've already learned a lot from the first game to see why people love it so much, and
hmm,
they never kind of stop doing their little tricks, like you always feel those tricks in the game. So,
yeah,
apart from number
definitely.
three, which I've heard mixed reviews, but I've not looked at anything in it, so I'm still gonna work my way through the second game. Then I will get number three, and we'll see what my opinions are. But
Yeah, you should definitely play it. I think, yeah, even though people have said things about three, I mean, I say things about three because I'm not happy with it, but it's a very good game. It's a fantastic game, standalone. It's just that because you know what it once was, you're upset because things have been removed. But for you, fresh eyes, you could play number three and be like, "This is fucking sick! Like, this is brilliant."
mm,
Because it is a really, don't get me wrong, a really well made game. Like, it's really good. But yeah, as the story goes on, for me in the original lineup, the first three is the most like believable part of the story, because, like we said before, it's like it's set, the first one's set in the mansion where like the lab explodes and there's like an issue with the laboratory, and it's just in that house. Then the second one, as you've come to know, it's set in a police station, and that's when you start to see how it's spreading into the city. And then part three is when the whole city is pretty much infected. Because like two and three, I know some people were telling you on Twitch, but like two and three take place at like the same time. So I think it the timeline overlaps. So basically, the beginning of three and the end of three has two in the middle of it. That's the best way I can
Right.
explain it.
Right.
So in the original games, like playing as Jill, she'll go into the police station where you were with Leon, and she might see some of the things that you've done, or as Claire or whatever. So like they interlap in that way. But
That's clever. That's clever.
it's
I'm
very
looking forward
clever.
to seeing it. I feel like there's more that I can kind of discuss in the second game because
Mhm.
it has got a bit more story to it, I guess. You know, you've got Marvin there and you know what Claire's plan is and things like that from the get go. And but I'm
Yeah,
still very early into it. I think I read it. Well, someone said it was about a 10-hour game. I played probably about 3 hours of it, so I've not got like a long way to go, but I've got like a fair bit to go. I think so for story and
yeah.
that to kick in.
For stories, I mean, I would say, obviously, just to like go off track for a second, like seeing you play the Resident Evil 2 remake, I think that you've definitely learnt your lesson as a Resident Evil player, and like you're thinking a bit different. Because I didn't think you get that far in that short space. What did you stream for? Like 2 hours?
Yeah, about 2-3 hours.
Yeah, and you had basically got, and to everyone out there listening, she's not got any further, but she's just passed the first fight with Birkin. So you have just got to that bit, and that is not midpoint, but it could be depending how fast you play the next part. Like, but
Right.
you've definitely done, let's say, Act One.
Right.
So
Okay.
like you've done like a third of the game, I would say.
Interesting. So you say I
Yeah,
learnt my lesson, but like I used all my ammo within the first like 5 minutes of being in the petrol station, the gas
but it's
station, whatever
easy
it
to do
is. Yeah.
because that is hard though. When I very first played the game, that is the only game where the first zombie has ever killed me, and I was so shocked by it. I went through and I played it. I think I played it on hard. I'm not sure. And the first zombie wiped me out, and I was like, "This is something's not right here." So I went back and I was like, "Okay, we'll play it on normal." And then it takes a while to learn because those zombies are most bloody realistic zombies I think I've ever come across.
Yeah, we won't go too far into it because we've
No,
almost hit an hour, but we'll discuss this in the next one. But yeah, there is a lot that I think is amazing on what they've done with this second one. Coming
yeah,
from a completely blind perspective, I can imagine, I can understand why so many people were like so over the moon with this make of
hmm
the game. Purely down to the fact that when you shoot someone, like you see the bullet knock actual like features off their face.
yeah, and you can
That is
dismember
hard
them and everything.
that is fucking hard to do, you know,
Hmm
like from a development perspective. And it's like, oh my God, they did it. And they did it so well. And like the detail is perfect. Every shot, it's perfect. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't look like, oh God, if I shoot the ear off, it looks a bit shit. It's like, no, like it looks good. So
yeah,
really looking forward to playing the rest of that and breaking it down.
definitely. Well, as you said, we are coming close to the end of our time. I think we've got a couple of minutes, so let's just say for like to finalize it. So
Mhm.
like Resident Evil 1, like you've played through, you completed it, you encountered all the enemies, all the bosses. One, what's your like final opinion on it? And two, like, are there any like standout moments for you
I think overall, my opinion is it's not what I was expecting. It's complete opposite to what I was expecting. I
in
was
a good way?
expecting, in a good way, yeah.
Mhm.
I was expecting it to maybe feel like a bit of a slog. Like that sounds really bad, but from someone that's never played the games, and I tend to avoid things with a lot of hype. But
Okay.
I'm glad I didn't, because basically, yeah, it carried itself well, and I feel like it can take as long as you want or as quick as you want, which is really nice that it's got that flexibility to it as
hmm
well, which is just a really strange thing. I think the thing that stood out for me the most, oh, that's a really good question. I think, yeah, it probably would be just how complex it is of a game, and it's not anything to do with really zombies. I'd say that's the
hmm
most smallest part of that game.
Yeah, I would.
And
Yeah.
I thought, when I going in, I thought that was going to be the biggest part of that game, and it's
hmm
just not. So if anyone's kind of never thought about picking it up or felt like they're too far behind, it's still very current. I think
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed that from streaming it. A lot of people watch it and they're like, "I love this game. You've played the original," or a lot of people have only ever played that version as well. But like, yeah, it's still very current and it's definitely worth playing. Just yeah, it will challenge you more than I thought it would.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
does. I think
so
that's also a really fair thing that you said because I agree like wholeheartedly. I think like in the end, the enemies become an inconvenience,
yeah,
and like to you because I think even though we say it's not like a story driven game, the remake is a bit more story driven in that sense, but also you're just so intrigued of what this thing can throw at you next that I was almost like, I need to use this key and find out what's in that room. Like, there's a zombie in my way, like, get out of my way. Like, the zombies aren't that important part of it. The important part is like literally trying to like suss what's going on and put someone to justice or whatever.
Yeah.
What did you think of the whole Wesker twist? I mean, were you expecting it, or did you know from beforehand? Or
Um, I weren't I weren't necessarily suspecting it, but at the same time, when I saw him, I was like not shocked,
Mhm.
because Barry was acting very off. He did like a few things that you like question. Um, but yeah, Wesker was nowhere to be seen, so I just thought, yeah, I thought no, like the first thing that crossed my mind was he'll be trapped somewhere. And then
Yeah,
further down the line, you start hearing Barry talking, being like, well, I don't want to basically fuck everyone over and things like that. So you're like, okay, he's obviously not good. And then you see him at the end. And even though you've only seen him once, when you actually see him again, you're like, I fucking hate you. Like
yeah.
there is just it's so weird how like you've never seen him apart from the beginning, and then when the only other time you see him, you hate him,
He's
and it's just
smarmy, isn't he?
yeah, and he's just cocky, and then yeah, I won't go into the rest of that part, but like you're just like, oh
I feel like as well, if you play it back, playing it again, knowing what you know about him the whole way through, you think, God, what a prick. You
yeah,
feel like he's like and he plays on your naivety a lot, or he tries to, but obviously you as a player, it's like Jill is more wise. I feel like that's the only thing they don't really show in the remake. Not that they showed it in the original either, but you don't get to see Jill really mulling this over or processing what's happening, because there's a bit we spoke about her how like naive she is, where she like just breaks into the B mansion, the second mansion, and then she knocks on the door, and well, she doesn't knock, she goes close to the door and she hears Barry obviously having a conversation that sounds very sinister, obviously with two separate voices. And then when she walks in, she's like, Barry, what's up? I heard you talking to someone. And he goes, oh, well, oh, I can't believe you heard that. I'm talking to myself. She's like, oh, Barry, are you okay? And I was like, are you fucking stupid?
that's literally
Like,
what I did though. Like if you watch it back, I'm like, fuck off, Jill. Like, why are you doing? Do you know what I mean? I'm like, come
mhm.
on. But yeah, it's
They
so
don't
good.
give you the hint that that she's like playing it cool, but really knows that he's a bit shady.
Yeah,
It's only that bit where you get to where she takes the gun off him that you realize that, oh, okay, she's not thick.
she's not stupid. Yeah,
Yeah, she's been listening. But I wish she got a bit more of that in the middle of the game, like maybe
yeah,
just some
I do.
moments of her talking to herself, like something's not right. Like, do you know what I mean? To make her seem more of a rounded,
Yeah,
not idiot.
I do. I do. I think she deserves more credit than she gets in the beginning of that game, which is kind of annoying. But I tell you what I do like. I like the fact that at the end of the game, they kind of try to say to her, like, calm down, like, we're going to handle this. And who handles it? Jill. Like,
Yeah,
in that playthrough, she's the one that handles it in the end.
yeah. Because Chris literally
Um,
says, "Isn't he, let me have my moment," or something along
yeah,
those lines. And
he
then
did
she goes and
that.
fights a tyrant. She's like, oh,
Yeah.
"Okay, you go do that."
He's like, let me have my moment. And then she's like, fine. And then you go out and he gets absolutely slaughtered. And I'm like, well, you fucked that moment up, didn't you? And then you have to do it anyways. So good, though. Such
The
a
only
so
thing about
fun
that
game.
very ending scene that does make me laugh, and it's more so in the original than this one, is if you play Jill's playthrough, you've just experienced a whole mansion instant as Jill, and then she's sitting in the helicopter, and then she leans on Chris as if like he's the one that's done everything, and he sort of looks at her like, "I've saved the day." And I was like, "You didn't fuck all. You were trapped in a
I know.
cell while I was doing
I know.
everything."
I said on that, I was like, I'd kick everyone out of that plane and fly myself home. I'd be like, you're all useless. Bye. I'm
Yeah,
out. Like, but yeah, it's so good. Like, and I think even though you don't see much of the characters, and even though they've got very cheesy voices, you still kind of they've still got really good development in them. Like
definitely.
it still speaks out. So yeah, onwards and upwards to the next Resi games. I'm super excited. Very,
Good.
very
I can't
excited.
wait. And you'll be streaming it again as usual.
Oh yeah, I will be definitely. I feel like I've kind of committed to this journey now to streaming them all, and a lot of people are enjoying seeing me play all the games like for the first time.
Hmm.
Because yeah, I do a lot of stupid shit, but it's good. It's good fun.
That's what we tune in to see.
We're tuning to see the failures. Yeah.
Good. Well, okay. I think we've kind of run our course on time. So, final thing: would you recommend Resident Evil to someone else?
Yes. Just
Done.
if you've got yeah. Just have some patience though, because it ain't easy. It's not as easy as you think. You will be looking at walkthroughs, like at least
It
I
is.
was, because yeah. I could talk about it all day, but yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's
It
complex,
is.
man.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart. I think it's a hard game, and like it's been so many people's favorite game. It's been my favorite game since like the 90s, like 95, whenever it came out. Like whenever I first played it and like scared the shit out of me, something was born.
Yeah.
A fantastic set of games, and I can't wait to watch you play the second one.
Yes.
Okay, then. So we don't know what we'll be doing in the next podcast. Who knows what we'll be talking about? You'll have to wait and see. But
Yes.
okay, so that was us talking about Resident Evil. So we'll see you later.
Bye.